Penelope Thorne stood frozen on the wooden platform, the weight of every stair in Sweetwater Creek pressing down on her harder than the Arizona sun. It was 1885, and she had never felt this exposed. The town's first bachelor auction was supposed to raise money for a new schoolhouse, but everyone knew why she'd been called up last. Penelope wasn't meant to find companionship. She was meant to give the town a good laugh. She clutched her tiny coin purse with trembling fingers, all $8.37 of her savings inside. It was everything she owned. The men stood on the stage waiting to be chosen, and the crowd watched her with barely hidden smirks. She knew what they expected. For her to fail. For her to walk away embarrassed like she always did. Penelope began, but her voice cracked under the weight of the silent crowd. A ripple of laughter broke out. Her face burned. Then she saw him, a man leaning against the general store, arms folded, hat tilted low. Unlike the others, he wasn't posing or grinning. He stood calm, still, and he was looking straight at her. Penelope didn't know him well. No one did. Cade Blackwell had arrived only 3 months ago, and rumors followed him like shadow. Some said he was an outlaw. Others claimed he had once been a lawman. One thing was certain. He was a mystery. With her heart pounding, Penelope forced her voice louder. $1. I bid $1. The crowd erupted. Mayor Wilkins cupped his ear dramatically. Did you say $1? $1, she repeated, nodding toward Tommy Jenkins, the only bachelor left unchosen. Tommy was kind but shy, with a stutter that made people impatient. No one else would bid for him. Penelope did not want to humiliate him or herself, but she had to try. Going once, going twice. $10. The deep voice cut through the crowd like a blade. People parted as Cade Blackwell stepped forward. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair curling at his neck. His boots thudded on the platform as he climbed up, and he looked straight at Penelope, as if no one else existed. For which man are you bidding? Mayor Wilkins asked, flustered. I'm not, Cade said calmly. I'm offering myself, and I'm bidding $10 on the lady. Gasps spread like wildfire. Penelope's breath caught. Cade Blackwell wasn't for sale. He wasn't even part of the auction. This was not how things were supposed to go. 15, Cade continued, his eyes locked on hers, for the privilege of escorting Miss Thorne to the Founder's Day dance. The crowd spun into confusion. Penelope could barely think. Cade wasn't smiling. He wasn't playing a joke. His face held only calm determination. $20, he finished, pulling bills from his wallet and placing them into the tin. Unless anyone else wants to bid higher. No one did. The silence was absolute. Mayor Wilkins cleared his throat, stunned. Sold for $20 to Mr. Cade Blackwell. Penelope stood frozen as Cade crossed the platform and stopped in front of her. He extended his hand. His palm was rough from ranch work, but his touch was gentle. Miss Thorne, he said quietly, may I escort you home? Quote, her fingers trembled when she placed her hand in his as he led her through the stunned crowd. She felt dozens of eyes burning into her back. Whispered questions rose behind them like dust. Once they reached the edge of town, she finally found her voice. Why did you do that? Cade's lips curved into a slow, warm smile, the first she had ever seen on his usually serious face. Because some treasures are overlooked by people too blind to see their worth. Her heart gave a sharp, painful jump. She didn't know how to answer that. She had never been called a treasure in her entire life. The walk to her cottage felt unreal. Word was already spreading. Curtains twitched. Doors cracked open. Everyone was watching. Thank you for seeing me home, Mr. Blackwell, she said as they reached her porch. Cade, he corrected softly. And it was my pleasure, Penelope. Her name on his lips felt like something precious, something fragile. You don't have to go with me to the dance, she blurted out. You don't owe me anything. Is that what you think? He asked, stepping closer. His voice dropped. That I did this for show? For entertainment? Quote, "What else could it be?" she whispered. "Look at me, Cade. I'm not the kind of woman men choose in public. I'm the kind they pretend not to see." Cade reached out and gently took her hand, lifting it to his lips. The soft brush of his mouth against her knuckles made her breath stop. "Then they're fools," he murmured. "All of them. I'll see you Saturday at 6. Wear something that brings out your eyes." She opened her mouth to tell him her eyes were just plain brown, nothing special. But he was already walking away, his tall figure disappearing into the dusk. Inside her cottage, Penelope leaned against the closed door. Her heart was racing so fast she could barely breathe. What had just happened? Why her? Why now? In the quiet room, she touched the spot where his lips had brushed her skin, and for the first time in years, something warm and bright flickered in her chest. Hope. A feeling she had nearly forgotten. And as the sun set behind Sweetwater Creek, Penelope Thorne wondered if her life had just changed forever. Penelope's hands shook the entire morning of the Founder's Day dance. She had dressed early, too early, but she couldn't sit still. Mrs. Hollister's emerald green silk dress hung beautifully on her, and the slippers Cade sent fit as if they had been made for her. The scent of lavender from the perfume he gifted lingered softly on her skin. What if he didn't come? What if he had changed his mind? What if it had all been a moment of impulse he now regretted? Penelope paced her small cottage, her heart pounding at every creak of the floor. She caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress made her eyes look warm, bright, alive. But was it enough? Enough to stand beside a man like him? When the knock finally came at exactly 6, she froze. Then she opened the door. Cade Blackwell stood there looking like something out of a dream. His coat was neatly pressed, his dark hair combed, though one curl fell stubbornly over his forehead. In his hands was a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Penelope," he said, his voice low and warm. He didn't stare at her dress. He didn't stare at her hair. He stared at her like she was the most important thing he had ever seen. "You look," he paused, searching for the right word. "Beautiful." Heat rushed through her chest. "Thank you, and thank you for the slippers. They're perfect." "I'm glad," he said with a small smile. "Shall we?" She took his arm, feeling his strength under her hand. Together they walked toward the town hall, and though the streets were lined with curious eyes, Cade didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he didn't care. Inside, the hall glowed with lanterns and candles. The floor was polished, the music lively, and every single head turned the moment they entered. "They're staring," Penelope whispered. "Let them," Cade murmured. "They're seeing the truth for once." Before she could answer, the orchestra began a waltz. Cade took her hand and guided her to the floor. His touch was steady and warm. Penelope hadn't danced in years, but somehow, with him, every step felt natural. "Where did you learn to dance so well?" she asked. "My mother," he said softly. "She insisted." Quote, "I'm sorry she's gone. I lost her young, but she'd be pleased to know I'm dancing with you tonight." Her heart fluttered. When the waltz ended, a crowd of people surrounded them at once. Townsfolk who had barely spoken to Penelope before were suddenly smiling, asking her questions, complimenting her dress. Some asked Cade about the auction, trying to understand why he had chosen her. Every time, Cade answered calmly, steadily, "I saw something worth choosing." The words made Penelope's breath catch every single time. After almost an hour of noise and questions, Cade leaned close. "Would you like some air?" "Yes," she said, relieved. He guided her outside to a small garden behind the hall. Lanterns flickered gently, and the sounds of music drifted out into the cool evening air. Penelope breathed deeply. "Thank you. I didn't expect so much attention." "You deserve it," he said. "They're finally seeing you." She shook her head. "They're only looking because of you. Before today, I was invisible." Cade turned to her then, his face serious in the lantern light. "Penelope, I noticed you long before the auction." She blinked. "You did?" He nodded. You were kind to Mrs. Abernathy when others were impatient. You rescued little Alice Miller when she had an asthma spell. You helped the Watson girl with her torn dress without charging extra. You left food on the Jenkins porch when they were struggling. You watched me, she whispered. Every day, he said quietly. You carry yourself like someone who's had to be strong alone for too long. I saw that before anyone else. Her eyes stung. Cade lifted a hand and brushed a tear from her cheek. His touch sent warmth through her whole body. When I saw how the town planned to treat you at the auction, I couldn't let it happen, he said. You're worth more than any of them know. Penelope felt something inside her shift, something small and protective that she had built around her heart. The music inside drifted into a slow waltz. Dance with me, Cade said softly. Not for them. For us. He pulled her close, and she rested her hand on his chest as they swayed beneath the lantern light. For the first time in years, she felt safe, seen, wanted. What happens tomorrow, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. When the town forgets all this? Quote, tomorrow, Cade said, his thumb brushing her hand, I'll come to your door again. She looked up at him, and the next day, and the next. As long as you'll have me. Before she could answer, the door behind them creaked open. Mabel Watson poked her head out, eyes wide with nosy excitement. There you two are, she said. Everyone's talking about you. Cade smiled calmly. Let them. Penelope felt his hand tighten around hers. Inside, the mayor called everyone to supper. Cade guided her in again, and they sat together at one of the long tables. As they ate, people kept glancing their way, whispering. What do they want now? She asked softly. To understand, Cade said. People gossip when they see something they don't expect. Us? Penelope said. He leaned in close, his voice warm against her ear. Something good. Her heart stuttered. Later, when the supper ended, the dancing began again. Cade danced every slow song with her, and every time he looked at her, she felt like the world had shifted beneath her feet. When midnight struck, they walked out into the cool night. Cade took her home through quiet streets. Lanterns glowed in windows. A dog barked in the distance. The stars shimmered above them like scattered diamonds. Penelope stopped at her porch steps, unsure what came next. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Cade lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Penelope, he said softly, I'll see you tomorrow. Her heart skipped. Promise, she whispered. Promise. He leaned in, brushed a feather-light kiss against her cheek and stepped back. Good night. She watched him walk down the road, the glow of moonlight soft on his shoulders, her heart beating wildly. Inside her cottage, she touched her cheek where he had kissed her, hardly able to breathe. Cade Blackwell had changed everything. And for the first time, Penelope dared to believe something she had never believed before. Maybe she was worthy of being chosen. The next morning, Penelope woke with a feeling she had almost forgotten existed. Hope, warm and bright, sitting in her chest like a tiny flame that refused to go out. And Cade kept his promise. He knocked on her door that afternoon, just as he said he would. He looked the same, and yet different, softer around the eyes, steadier in the way he looked at her. As if the dance, the night, and the quiet talk in the garden had changed something inside him too. May I come in? He asked. Yes, Penelope said, though her voice trembled. He stepped into her little cottage, and it felt suddenly full of him, full of something she didn't have words for. I meant what I said last night, Cade told her. I want to know you, truly know you. And so began a steady rhythm that became the center of Penelope's days. Cade came to see her almost every afternoon. They talked, walked, laughed, and shared pieces of themselves. Little truths at first. Then, deeper ones. Penelope told him about her parents. About the loneliness she had tried to ignore for years. About the way people looked at her as if she didn't belong anywhere. Cade listened. Really listened. He told her about Texas, about the badge he once wore, about the mistakes that drove him to lay it down, about the guilt he still carried for someone he couldn't save. Penelope reached for his hand. "You did what you could," she whispered. "Sometimes that has to be enough." He stared at her then, not like he was looking at her, but like he was seeing her. Every part of her, everything she tried to hide. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly, "stronger than anyone in this town." Weeks passed, then a month, then 2. Penelope's new dress shop started to take shape. Cade helped her plan it, encouraged her, told her she deserved a future of her own building. He brought flowers for her windowsill. He brought warm pastries from the bakery. Sometimes he brought nothing but himself, and that was always enough. Soon, the town stopped whispering. They started smiling instead, then nodding, then accepting. Penelope Thorne, overlooked for years, became someone people noticed. But they noticed her for the right reasons now. She wasn't invisible anymore. Cade saw to that. One beautiful October afternoon, Cade invited her to ride with him. She climbed onto his gentle mare, nervous but excited. Cade led her through his land, across a quiet creek, and up a grassy hill that opened into a hidden clearing full of wild flowers. It felt like the world stopped breathing. "There's something I want to ask you," Cade said. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Penelope's breath left her entirely as he opened it. Inside lay a pearl ring surrounded by tiny diamonds. Old, loved, precious. "It was my mother's," he said. "I've been saving it for the woman I would spend my life with." Her heart pounded. "Penelope, I love you," he said softly. "I love your courage, your kindness, the way you see the good in others. You changed everything in my life. You gave me a reason to start again." He took her hand, steady and warm. "Will you marry me?" Penelope had dreamed of many things in her quiet moments. Not this, never this. "Yes," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes, Cade, I'll marry you." His smile lit the entire clearing as he slipped the ring onto her trembling finger. Then he pulled her close and kissed her, slow and full of promise. They told the town that evening, and Sweetwater Creek erupted with excitement. Even the people who once looked down on Penelope now hugged her, congratulated her, and cried happy tears as if she had always belonged among them. Mrs. Hollister made her wedding dress with more care than she'd ever put into any garment. Sheriff Miller offered to walk her down the aisle. The whole town decorated the church with pine and ribbons. And on Christmas Eve, Penelope walked toward Cade with the same feeling she'd had when he first stepped forward at the auction. Awe, wonder, love. Cade stood at the altar with a look in his eyes that made her breath catch. As if she was the only person in the room. As if she had been the only person he ever meant to find. They exchanged vows, hands trembling but steady in each other's. When Cade kissed her, the church erupted in cheers. And when they walked out together as husband and wife, snow fell gently around them, as if the whole world was blessing their beginning. Their life together unfolded like a warm story told by a fire. Penelope's dress shop, Thorne Designs, bloomed with success. Women came from towns miles away just to wear her creations. Cade expanded his ranch, adding more horses and cattle. Their home filled with laughter, first with their son Jonathan, then James, then little Elizabeth, who had Cade's smile and Penelope's stubborn spark. 5 years later, Penelope sat on the porch watching Cade chase their 3 children through the yard, all of them laughing in the golden afternoon sun. Once, no one had chosen her. Once, she had been the girl everyone ignored, the girl people whispered about, the girl meant to be laughed at during an auction. But then, a man stepped forward. A quiet, strong man with a steady gaze and a brave heart. A man who saw her worth when the whole town refused to. Cade walked up the porch steps, lifting Elizabeth into his arms. He leaned down and kissed Penelope softly. "You know," he said, "choosing you that day was the best thing I ever did." Penelope smiled, touching her ring. the one that had changed everything. "You didn't just choose me," she said. "You helped me choose myself." And as the sun dipped low behind the tall Arizona hills, Penelope rested her head on Cade's shoulder, surrounded by the family she never thought she'd have. She had found her happily ever after, not in a ballad or a fairy tale, but in a cowboy who refused to let anyone laugh at her again.